Nancy, you have the word. You can share the screen. You can share it if you want to share it and you have a PowerPoint or some other material.
Okay. Let me see if I can find what I want to share. I did. Can you see?
Yes, we can, or I can. I cannot talk for everyone.
So I'm going to assume that everyone can if Tanya can. So so hi, it's so nice to see everyone today, and I want to talk a little bit about the current project that we're working on, youth and media literacy lessons learned from the community. So I kind of thought about the, hold on, no, let me advance. There we go. So when I was first kind of approached by Sarah with this this concept and this idea, I thought I'd start off by I was kind of thinking about the meme too, like how this all got started, where we are. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how we got started. So Sarah had been in a webinar, had met with some folks from WOUB, which is a public broadcasting station in Athens, Ohio. And they had been involved in a wonderful media literacy program where they were actually getting the students to create videos and create media content to explore their own identity. And we really wanted to expand that to other children, to other teens and youth. And so we have been collaborating ever since with WOUB. And then we also brought in some other community partners, CET, our local PBS station, the Cincinnati Public Schools, and of course, the University of Cincinnati. And so the idea here is that we wanted to create this program that would incorporate media literacy skills, but also have the children and teens explore their own identity. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what WOUB had done, and then how that would be incorporated into what we were hoping to accomplish. So WOUB, as you can see here on the right, it's a public television station, and that's the coverage area for WOUB. And if we look at that in comparison to the map on the other side of Ohio, they actually cover quite a bit of what's known as the Appalachian region of Ohio. And this is particularly significant because the Appalachian region is a really interesting part of Ohio and part of the United States. In Ohio, it consists of 32 of our 88 counties, and it accounts for almost 40% of the square mileage in the land of Ohio. And it stretches across, as you can see here, the southern border and the eastern border as well. And they struggle quite a bit with economic distress. They're also geographically isolated. So there's not a heavy population, they're pretty spread out. And they also have a lot of trouble with access to lots of different things, everything from healthcare to technology and broadband. So sometimes you can be in a region and not have access to the internet. And I experienced this quite a bit. I live in this little blue county over here called Claremont County. And I've done quite a bit of research in the Appalachia area. And my students are kind of surprised at times when they start heading out this direction and suddenly they don't have cell phone coverage anymore. And they're like, we're only like 40 miles from, we're only 40 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. What happened to my cell phone coverage? And it just literally kind of disappears and it comes in and out. So one of the priorities then in Ohio from the governor's office is to work in conjunction to expand broadband infrastructure to make Ohio a leader in mobile technologies. And you can imagine what kind of implications then that had during the pandemic. So what we were really interested in is, how can we think about what does that kind of identity then mean? How can we translate that and share that identity with others? Because it is a really kind of distinctive identity to explore. And so what we found at WOUB is that they had received a grant from the POV, and their grant was called Our America Documentary and Dialogue. And they had a really interesting opportunity. They worked with 4 high schools in the southeastern Ohio to help the students at those schools explore their identity through the creation of small documentaries. And so as you see here, they got the grant before the pandemic struck. So, so they had to kind of rely more on Zoom connections and calls to make connections with the high school. But we've got the high school here, and then several of the participants. And then the other part that's really significant is at the bottom here, in the bottom middle, that's Robert Sawyer. And he is actually the producer for a documentary which inspired this grant and inspired this idea of looking at identity. He created a documentary called Portraits and Dreams. Now, Portraits and Dreams is based off of a book of a Wendy, I can't remember Wendy's name now, sorry. She had gone into the area, more in Kentucky than in Ohio, but she'd gone into the Appalachian area in the 1970s, and she had worked with children and in the area to create their own pictures. So in the 70s, as you can imagine, they're getting these cameras, and they're getting these technologies, learning how to record audio and different types of things like that. And so in the 70s, that's kind of a new concept, right? You had to wait and get the pictures developed and all that stuff. So, but this was really starting to give them a voice. They had an opportunity to express themselves in different ways. They could talk about their own identity, and they were kind of celebrating the best out of themselves, and thinking about not only their current experiences, but being able to share that with others. So so they developed. So Robert developed a film. They went back to that community and to those teens that had participated in the program, and they created this documentary, kind of like the follow-up to their experiences. And so I'd like to share a little, hopefully the video will work. So I'd like to share just the trailer for POV, so you can get an idea of what the film was like.
I take good pictures. I can do that all day and not quit.
Why?
My natural habitat, I guess.
Do you dream a lot?
Yeah,
What do you think dreams are?
something that's in your conscience.
Having a camera gives anyone power, but particularly children.
Probably learn about nature and all that. Other people, like my family, your family.
There you guys are looking at the pictures.
My mom and my dad. That means a lot to say, hey, I took this picture, I developed it, and I printed it.
I remember you talking about wanting to be a photographer.
Yeah. Childhood dream. Then you grow up and start working.
Like that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yep. It was fun thinking back to what you had dreamed and then how are you going to bring that to life in pictures.
Yeah.
We were important because we were taking those pictures. And I want to make a difference in their life and inspire them the way that you inspired us.
The opportunity to learn to do photography, it was something that left a mark on me. Have we left a mark on you?
Oops. Sorry. So as you can tell, it was a really moving experience for those kids. They really got to think about. They felt special. They felt unique, and we wanted to try to kind of recreate that with today's youth, and get them thinking about what makes them special and what makes them unique. And so what evolved out of that initial relationship at WOUB was that over the pandemic, ironically, they were able to zoom in and make as many connections as they could during the 2020-21 school year. And the students eventually developed their own films. So they had their own mini documentaries. The mini documentaries, they had premiere events at their schools when it was finally safe to be able to gather in different places. And then the films themselves premiered on WOUB's HD channel. And so each of the schools had a half an hour to be able to show their videos, and that happened in August of this past year. And then eventually, in October, the films were featured at the Athens International Film and Video Festival, and shown at the cinema. So these teens were able to take their experiences, make their videos, share their identity, and be able to share that with the world. And so when we talked with WOUB, we wanted to be able to share that and experience with other people and with other students. And so we asked if we could follow their model and apply it with the Cincinnati Public Schools and with our colleagues here at the University of Cincinnati. And of course, they loved the idea. And they also were interested in doing cross-cultural collaboration so that the students in Eastern Ohio had a chance to talk to the folks in Cincinnati and vice versa. So we applied what's known as the community-based participatory research approach to this project. So participatory-based research is an approach to research that involves collective, reflective, and systematic inquiry. And it's one in which the researchers really engage with the community stakeholders as equal partners in the steps of the research project. So our goals of educating, improving practice, and bringing about social change were really important for all of the members, and all of the members had value and had voice in the project. So we've done quite a bit on the community-based and participatory in the action part. We're still working on the R, but we'll get there. So we're still working on like writing up our findings and doing some more assessment of the whole project. But how did we engage in this conversation? We made sure that we included the POV producers and the outreach coordinators. So Robert Sawyer was involved. The other POV research or outreach coordinators were involved as well. They actually were able to come and speak to some of our classes and some of our students this past semester. We also involved heavily WOUB staff and CET staff. It was really important that we talk with our WOUB staff to make sure we were being consistent with what they had done in the year prior, and to build on that, because they said they struggled a bit with, obviously with the pandemic. They had really intended on being able to go out to the schools and do a lot of hands-on work with the students, and sometimes that was possible and sometimes it wasn't. So they were really looking to make improvements on what they had already done. We also made sure we talked really extensively with our Cincinnati public school teachers, CPS teachers, and we involved an ELA, English language instructional coach for grades 7 through 12 from CPS. So the instructional coach has a really unique position. She doesn't teach per se. She doesn't have a classroom of her own, but she does provide support and coaching for other ELA teachers. And so she does have a really good understanding of curriculum design, curriculum implementation, learning outcomes, and the like. And so if a teacher is struggling with something or is looking for some new ideas, she can help coach that teacher through that. And so she was very critical to helping us develop curriculum that could be integrated into the English language courses, the English courses, because those were the teachers that we were working with in CPS. And then lastly, we had our UC students. So the course there was course collaboration, but then there were also student workers. So over the summer of 2021 is when we had our student workers involved, and they were helping develop the curriculum, testing out different ideas and things like that, and really kind of building out the slides, and I'll get to that in just a moment. And then the course collaboration. So in the fall semester, this past fall semester, Sarah and I, our classes, were collaborating across these two different courses offered in two different colleges. So she offered a course in the instructional design and technology program within education, and then I offered a children and media course within the communication program. And so the students in those courses had an opportunity to interact with each other and watch some of the same films together, and really think about, what does this mean about giving children power with their media choices and their media production. And this is particularly critical now, since our youths are out there making content all the time. And so, how has that transitioned from the 1970s till now, and thinking about all those different kinds of implications. So, for our approach, we were exchanging ideas across Ohio. So we have our collaborators. So you might see some familiar faces from the previous slide. So we've got our WOUB collaborators here in the middle. And then we have our CET collaborator in the middle of the top row. And then our students, and Sarah is down here at the bottom on the my left, and myself. So we had several meetings over the summer. The students worked really hard, and the CPS instructors and everybody was working really well together. And in order to really think about what we wanted, it took us a little bit of time to exchange some ideas and come up with some overarching goals. So what we decided with the program was that we wanted to do, we wanted the students to engage both in analysis and in production with a range of different types of media platforms and media content, to be able to enhance their media literacy skills, to empower and amplify their voices and the voices of their community. So through this work, we had students examine both their individual identity and their collective identity as represented in the media, the power and the impact of the media on their identities, and then how representation in production can close off, limit, or empower voice. And with these goals in mind, we worked with our community partners and came up with some key elements we needed to incorporate into our curriculum. So first off, the English courses, they already have a full curriculum. So we wanted to make sure we could develop something that could be integrated into their existing curriculum. So that was a key element for both in the folks in Athens, the teachers in Athens, as well as the teachers in Cincinnati Public Schools. Also, we wanted to make sure that they explored their own self-identity before they explored the identity of others. So as we were thinking about cross-cultural communication, we wanted to make sure they knew who they were before they started really thinking about who the other is, who these people that they were going to have these collaborations with and have discussions with. We wanted to work on both areas, wanted to work on production skills, but we also wanted to think about meaning making. So for meaning making, it was important for us to really be thinking about what did these messages convey, and how are these messages conveying their thoughts and their feelings. And so how does sound make a difference in meaning making? How does the angle of the shot make meaning? And so we wanted to incorporate both of these aspects. The curriculum itself and the activities, they had to be easy to follow and they had to be quickly usable because again, they already have a curriculum for English. We needed to be able to kind of slide this in and make it easy for them to use. And the easiest way for them was through Google Docs, because Google Docs could integrate in several different systems. Each of the areas had their own learning management systems for their schools. And so we wanted something that would be kind of universal and be able to, that both the folks in Eastern Ohio and the folks in Western Ohio could use in either of their learning systems. And then the last thing that everybody insisted on was joy. So, and I bring that up because, we've really been struggling, right? The pandemic has been really challenging, and particularly for these communities that are underserved. And so we really wanted to bring back the joy, find ways in which they could talk about their identity, but not so much that it was all the negative sides. And there can be a lot of emphasis on the negative. And so we wanted to make sure that they were sharing some of the joy out of their own experiences and their own identity. So what did we do? We bit off more than we could chew, but as always, but we did get the first quarter completed. So what we developed were lesson plans for 4 quarters of the academic year. And with each set of lesson plans for the quarter, we started off with essential questions. We had student learning outcomes. We made sure that those student learning outcomes were aligning with Ohio's Ohio learning standards. And in Ohio and in the US, there's often this concept of a learning standard, Common Core, those types of things. And so we wanted to make sure they were in alignment with those. We created about 4 to 6 activities for each quarter. And also we made sure that we had additional teacher resources. So we had all the activities, but then we had extra information and extra support for the teachers, and that these were adaptable and extendable. So, so we also had additional resources for the students, and they could, so they could meet their students where they were. So this, if the students were struggling with particular aspects, they could use these additional resources to support those areas, or if they wanted to expand and, you know, they got through the lesson really quickly and they wanted to do more, we wanted to be able to provide that opportunity as well. So, we'll take a look here at quarter one. Quarter one was the quarter that has been most fully developed. And so what we ended up doing was having quarter one, making sure that was available and ready for the teachers for the fall. And then over this past semester, the students in our courses have been developing the remaining quarters. And I'll get to what happened to quarter two. I'm a little concerned that if I just click on the link, that I'll have some technical issues with the screen sharing. So what I did was I took some screenshots of what everything looks like. So we'll start off with quarter one and look at the lesson map. So for each quarter, there is a lesson map that has been developed. The lesson map takes you through the entire quarter. And so you can see there are clickable links here where the teachers can go off to the different resources that are available. And there's like 4 to 6 different activities for each on the lesson map. We had one lesson map so that everything could be accessed from there, because if you click on that link to go to the Google folder, it can get a little overwhelming, shall we say, because there's lots of information and there's lots of links but we wanted to make sure that the teachers had access to the original documents. But this map was the part that made it usable and user-friendly for our teachers. So if they were going to implement this, they had an essential question for the quarter, and they could go to the overview of the lesson, and each lesson has an overview, as we see here. So lesson 1 at the bottom, and then the overview at the top. So I'll talk a little bit about just this first overview lesson and show you what we developed for them. So with the overview lesson, the overview gives a really good map of exactly what they're going to be doing for these activities. So it starts off with the essential question. There's an overview describing what they're going to be doing in this activity, the learning outcomes, how it relates to the Ohio standards. There's a variety of materials that we've developed for them, which are all linked here. And then they can, again, they can access the folder to get access to the actual documents. There's a section for assessment, and then there's a section for additional resources for the teachers and the students. And each of these was developed for each activity or lesson within the program, within the quarter. So I'll go through a little bit about quarter one and just this first lesson. And then you can imagine, multiply this by 4 to 6 lessons, and you'll see what kind of work we were doing over the summer. So they all start off, they all have activity slides. So it's really helpful for the teacher to be able to have access to a slide deck that they can use. And so we gave them a slide deck, and each time we made sure that we included like an overview. We included links to all the different activities, so that as they're going through the deck, they can just click on the links and get to the materials that they need. So lesson 1, quarter 1, starts with the overview of who we are. And then the second page of all the slide decks is the same slide. It's the norms. So establishing with the students that there's no right or wrong answers, everyone's voice is valid, that they have permission to think outside the box, they can speak up as long as they're not tearing down others, and we're encouraging them to be present and to participate. So along the side there, you see all the different slides that we created for them. And so I'll just go through a couple of them to give you an example of what they look like kind of blown up. So one of the activities was the KWL chart. So again, they could link directly to this KWL chart. What did they already, so we wanted them to think about what they already knew before they watched some videos, what they already knew about the topic, what they wanted to know about the topic, and then what they learned from their experiences. So that's the L. So before they watched the video, they filled out the first two sections of the chart, which were their knowledge and what they wanted to know. And then they would watch a clip. So I don't have the clip loaded here, but you can see here that this is the first viewing, the look and see. So this was something that was critical to the development of the curriculum as well, that we take a couple of looks at the same thing with a different perspective, a different idea in mind as we're looking at the same content, because that can change your perspective and it can change what you're getting from the message. So the first viewing followed that KWL of, what do they want to know? What do they already know? What do they want to know? And then after the viewing, they would fill out the L, but they would also work on an identity chart. So as you see here at the bottom, the students had access to an identity chart. And again, we had details for how to fill out this identity chart, but they could click on the Google Doc link and it would take them to this Google Doc that has their identity chart. And so then the students, very comfortable working with Google Docs, could go in and fill out the form, or teachers could print it off if they were in the classroom and they wanted them to write. But it was a different way for them to be thinking about their identity, the different pieces of their identity. And then of course, at the bottom, we wanted to say, just because I am such and such doesn't mean that I am such and such. So again, kind of exploring that their identity, their identifiers, and what characteristics that they had. Then we also had, following that, we had an identity selfie activity. And again, as you see here, there's a link to the handout for the identity selfies. So we had them explore what other pictures looked like first. And again, we had access to discovered a critical exposure gallery. So there was a gallery of photos that they could look at. And then they would fill out again, another handout. So they would choose an image from the gallery. So on the right-hand side, this is one of the images. They would talk about it in small groups, the parents share, and really think about who created the image, what does it mean, what is the story that's being told by that image, what's the intended message. And so it was a really interesting way for them to start thinking about what do these pictures represent and what do they represent about ourselves. And then we had them do, they created their own selfie. So we asked them to take pictures from different angles, from different perspectives, and then create their identity selfie that they could then share with other people in their class, their classmates. They could share with others outside of class. And again, we had the Google Doc to help them establish that. We also had support for what does from up high look like? What does this mean? What do these angles look like? So there's other, as you go through the quarter, there are other activities that help support, what does framing look like? What does the angle represent? And different things like that. So what have we learned from all this work so far? First off, on the practical side, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to create the content, but then also, keeping the community partners involved and engaged, and really, making sure that their voice is incorporated into the project was really important. Revision. We had, there was always a new draft to be fixed. There were always, and with so many people working on the different documents too, somebody would catch something, but it was great because with all the different eyes, you could catch things. And so hopefully as they're rolling out, they're as clean as they possibly can be. We wanted to make sure that we checked in with our community partners, but that we didn't overburden them. So we were very careful to try to only check in with our partners maybe once. Some of our partners we checked in with more frequently, perhaps on a once a week basis. Others, like the teachers, when we first started this, they were still in the classroom, so we didn't want to bother them. We had to schedule meetings with them after school and things like that. So we had to be, very careful to balance that. And then the other thing that became really apparent as they started, so the teachers were really excited about it. They were anxious to get started and implement the lessons. But as they started getting into it, they realized that we had built way too much for quarter one. And so that's what happened to quarter two. They're like, there's just too much. They really thought they were going to get through those things much more quickly and have it all finished by quarter one. But then they realized, they needed more time. So we just extended quarter one through quarter two. And now, as we're getting towards the end of quarter two with the schools, we have engaged our students in our classrooms to develop activities for quarters 3 and 4, and we paired back. So we're really excited to see what happens over quarter 3 and 4. We also learned that our community partners were excited. So they were very anxious. And so they were ready to dive in and get involved and get active with the lessons. But like I said, we had built too much. So as much as they wanted to get through all these activities and they were really energized, there just wasn't enough time in the day. So from practical experience, those were some of the lessons we learned. From the media literacy space, what we learned is that we were trying hard not to completely rebuild the wheel. So we knew that there were a lot of existing resources for media literacy activities around the world. And so one of our initial steps was to really try to cultivate and collect some of those resources. And so we created a spreadsheet and a database and would provide links to all these different resources. And so we were really looking to find the good ones, but also ones that would fulfill the media literacy space we were looking to fulfill, which was about identity. And what we discovered was that identity work seemed rather limited in the media literacy space. There was a lot of media literacy lessons and curriculum that were already developed for deconstructing advertising, deconstructing media misinformation. There was a lot on misinformation. But what we weren't finding was too much in the media literacy space about identity work. So it was almost like it was separated. There were spaces for identity work that were being done outside of media literacy. And then there was media literacy work being done about representation but not connecting it to identity. So we needed to find an intersection between the two. And at the same time, there was also new research that was being conducted. So there's a project called the Mapping Impactful Media Literacy Practices. And just recently, they published a report where they're doing a pretty comprehensive look at notions of identity and inclusion and diversity within the media literacy space. So we're anxious to dive into that report and see what other resources we can find and what other literature currently exists. From the media literacy space also, there can be a disconnect from teaching production skills and teaching critical thinking skills. And it's difficult to do both. Oftentimes we get caught up in some of the production skills. So we're thinking about angle, we're thinking about the sound, we're thinking, and if you think about how long it takes to edit and to make a video, you kind of you can get an understanding of, well, they only have one quarter, or they only have one semester. So how can we get both the teachings, the production skills, as well as the critical thinking skills incorporated into the same space? So it was challenging. And we also had to think about other ways that they could engage with production that were more accessible to our students. What did they already have? What kinds of resources existed in the school districts that they could utilize there before heading out to other other skills. And then, of course, there's always new things just around the corner. So one of our exciting challenges was that there's always new content being produced, right? So season 34 came out as we were working on this lesson plan, and we wanted to try to incorporate season 34 and the documentaries into our work on identity. And there was one in particular that came out in season 34 that we really became very passionate about. And this one was called Neutral Ground, The Neutral Ground. Again, I'll show you a trailer here of the documentary so you can get a sense of what inspired us.
It is amazing. In 2015, I'm fighting Robert E. Lee. It's almost hilarious. Those statues never should have been erected.
Sorry.
The South lost.
Let's take down these statutes and put them in a place of proper remembrance, not reverence.
4 monuments to the Confederacy are set to come down in New Orleans.
The vote is considered one of the most sweeping moves by a U.S. city to cut ties with Confederate history.
But that's not what happened.
That's not what happened.
Backlash over a plan to remove these prominent monuments has led to death threats, intimidation, and even the intentional torching of a contractor's Lamborghini.
We're live out here at the Jeff Davis Monument. It is extremely chaotic right now.
We cannot have reconciliation without truth.
Okay. Here we go. This, for me, is the closest we can get to the actual Confederacy.
Somebody is going to abuse any institution.
People don't always take care of their objects well.
Right.
Including when that object is a person.
Including when it's a person.
We have intentionally misrepresented this history to our own citizens on purpose.
These people who are really bigoted, I bet we could just change their minds.
Why do you think that?
I don't know, because
Why do you hold that hope out, that illusion?
These stories are coming out. So I think we're in a different portal of time that these things are not going to be swept under the rug any longer.
Okay. Last slide, I promise. So with this new this new documentary we really wanted to incorporate, but you can imagine there's quite a bit of tensions with this new season. And also that, again, we're looking at that cross-cultural experience that the folks in the Appalachia area are part of the community then that has been doing the Confederacy reenactments. And so when there's kind of this dialogue and this discussion between what does the Confederacy mean, what, you know, that, again, it's getting into their identity. And so we were, you know, there's like, ooh, you know, how can we handle this effectively across both groups? So we needed to make sure that we have to check in with all of our partners, that everybody was on the same page, and that we can focus on different aspects and really thinking about how these stories are being told for both of our communities. And then we had to make sure that we remembered our original goal, which was the cross-cultural collaboration between urban and Appalachian communities. So again, some of these, you know, these topics in this latest documentary were really, it could be taken in a lot of different directions. The latest documentary was much different than Portraits and Dreams. The Neutral Ground was really talking a lot about some of the political and other issues that are going on in contemporary society, rather than thinking about empowerment of the youth. So, so it's really, you could take it in so many different directions, and there was a lot of concern that it could be it could be taken in lots of different directions. And how do you narrow it down so that we can bring it into the media literacy lessons that we wanted to focus on, and on the digital storytelling aspects, and that it would be beneficial for both the urban and the Appalachian communities. So that's where we're kind of at right now. We're working through Neutral Ground. We developed a really good relationship with the producer, CJ Hunt. We're hoping to bring him to campus in the spring. So we're still checking in with all our partners and seeing how we can make that work. So thank you so much for having me today. And I wanted to leave our contact information. So for myself and for Sarah, that if you wanted to reach out to us, we're happy to share resources. We really do want other schools and other facilities, other centers to use the curriculum that we've developed, and we'd love any kind of feedback or input you might have. So with that, I will stop sharing.